Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a special episode of Red Nova. This will be an episode dedicated to some world building and some backstory generation for our character, Starv. Now, Red Nova is the current title. I made a huge mistake. I called, when I first started recording the first episode of our one shot, I said Red Zona. Zona was half for Arizona, and I went with it. But I neglected to look at my notes off camera that it was actually going to be called Red Nova, and here's why. This is again related to Starv, who is our main protagonist or anti-hero in this one shot. And to be deadly honest with you guys, I did not expect it to do an episode dedicated to his backstory because again, this was a one shot. I was thinking he'll be a recycled character, but to be honest with you, his backstory, the more and more I think about it, is very intriguing, and here's why. Nova is the name of his wife, was his wife, his widow. And let's note that right here. Starv is our main character. They had a child, and the child's name perhaps was Sammy, a daughter. Let's say she was 6 years old. Nova and Starv are almost the same age. They're survivors. They're not mutants. They lived out somewhere in the very southwestern deep corner of the border between Arizona and Mexico. So let's write that in here. Lived on a farm, let's say southwest corner of Arizona. He was a farmer, she was at home, and again, Sammy was her daughter. But Starv was greedy. So he occasionally went to a nearby settlement. If we are thinking Wild West, we could say a saloon, and gambled quite often. He was playing cards against a member that he did not know was of the diehards. So, this member of diehards just happened to be at the saloon. Write this down. Diehard member. And he lost. Or let's say he won. Starv won without cheating. He just beat this diehard member. But this diehard member wasn't going to lose. He was a poor sport, sore loser. So he demanded his money back, demanded his caps back. Starv said, "You lost. I won fair and square. That's not how it works." So this diehard member, who we won't give him a name just yet. We're gonna have a name reveal at the very moment when Starv finds him. Starv knows what he looks like, though. This man has a large scar across his face. Easy to see him, to distinguish him. And so when Starv left, perhaps he was at the nearest large settlement, town, shopping for goods, food, etc. He's on his way home after perhaps a half day's of walk, travel. And once he got home, everything was normal. He went to bed. He kissed his family goodnight. They went to bed. Next morning, a group of diehards showed up. So next morning, diehards arrived, and in front of his eyes, killed his family. They tied up Starv and burned his house down. So they thought Starv was dead, but they killed his family in front of his eyes and burned the house down. But Starv survived. He escaped. The rope, however, he escaped. He was able to escape the burning fire, seeing the gang of diehards galloping in the distance away into the sunset with their horses on horseback. So this result impacted both Nova and Sammy, the 6-year-old daughter and his wife. So these two deceased. Starv returned to himself as now a nomad. His house was burnt. He had all he had on was his clothing and then some caps. The caps he won fair and square from that man. Now the farm, like I said, it's no longer it's been burnt. He lived out by himself with his wife. There was nobody around, and we could have helped him. And that's where our story started. That is where episode one, really 3 months after, started. So 3 months after all of this transpired, he was known as the nomad who traveled the wasteland, the desert wasteland, in search for his family's killer. So originally it was his wife's killer, but I thought it up to stakes and make it more cinematic and include a daughter in there. So I thought that's why his backstory was so gripping and sad that we should explore it. I was thinking about other potentials, like Nova was actually part of the Diehards, a twist. Like she was actually a member and she kept it secret from him, and she was perhaps killed for betraying or trying to escape. But I decided to abandon that. I want Starv's family legacy to have no real connection to the Diehards besides the gamble that he had at that saloon. So that saloon, I'm thinking it was what small city in the southwest corner of Arizona is called the Yuma. That's probably what the nearest settlement I'm thinking about. Probably a town, after post-nuclear war, whatever it's called now. Anyways, that's the backstory of Starve. Now, Red Nova, why red? Well, the landscape. There's really not much red rock. I, if I'm not mistaken, in the southern half of Arizona, mostly you find that in Sedona. But I think the red has to do with the fire that his house was set ablaze, and ultimately his family was already dead. So the red has to do with the fire that, and Nova is his wife. So Red Nova. I think that title works better, and I hope that this builds a bit of character for Starv moving forward. And this actually might help me in roleplay because I've been role playing a bit with at moments with Starv. I don't want to just brush this off as, oh, it's a one shot, who gives a damn? But at the same time, I do want to have um, something to work off. So I think this is not too much, but not, but it's enough to go off his motivations, his reasoning, and as to why he's been so far pretty badass. So in a way, it kind of is like John Wick. John Wick was with the dog. His wife's dog they bombed because his wife passed away. So this situation is like John Wick's dog. He's out for revenge, but it's different because he was a farmer. He wasn't exactly, an assassin, world Baba Yaga, world-renowned assassin. He was just a nobody. And he went to town to gamble every so often because he's greedy, and he had a family. He was trying to support them. He's a farmer. You know, they had crops. Those are probably all burned ablaze. They're all set ablaze. The diehards are vengeful. So what we really have to discover later on, the twist will be who this man was that has the scar on his face. So easy to remember, the man with the scar on his face, the face scar. So with that being said, in the next episode, which I'll probably film later tonight, we'll be approaching soon the observatory, where that man most likely is going to be. So that's it for now. Thank you for watching. This was just a special episode covering some backstory on our Starv, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.